Vice President Vance entirely dismantled Ilhan Omar, utilizing her very own statements. During the footage, she appeared to be beaming. She expressed gratitude to an eatery for providing meals to 2,300 kids daily. Her tone felt affectionate, and her appreciation seemed genuine. That same establishment was subsequently found guilty of embezzling $16 million from a national youth food initiative. It actually provided 0 meals to any youths. Furthermore, when that clip was shown for a second instance within the committee chamber, Ilhan Omar averted her gaze from the monitor and refused to observe herself beaming. To comprehend why a sitting U.S. representative averted her eyes from her own broadcasted clip, one must rewind roughly 60 minutes to the exact second Vice President Vance initially showed it and uttered a brief phrase. "Representative, I'm going to show a clip," he stated. He offered no context. He provided no preamble. He simply hit play. On the monitor, Omar manifested on a Minnesota Somali television broadcast in 2020. She conversed in the Somali language. Translations scrolled across the lower screen. "I am incredibly grateful to Safari for serving as one of the locations distributing meals, as well as for preparing dishes daily to support families and youths requiring nourishment. Every single day, Safari distributes 2,300 family and youth portions." She appeared delighted in the footage, showing the sort of grin that emerges from genuinely trusting one's own words. The broadcast concluded. Vance stared at her from across the desk. "Safari Eatery, you expressed gratitude to them specifically. 2,300 portions daily," he stated, then stopped briefly. "Allow me to explain what Safari Eatery actually accomplished." The fraud allegations. Omar shifted toward the audio device. "Senator, Vice President," she corrected in a monotone voice. That correction lingered in the atmosphere without changing anything. The proprietor of Safari Eatery was an individual named Salem Say, who was found guilty alongside Amy Bach in the most massive pandemic-era embezzlement operation in U.S. history. $16 million was siphoned through Safari exclusively, utilizing forged bills and fabricated attendance sheets packed with the identities of children who did not actually exist. They claimed 5,000 portions daily on official documents. In truth, at numerous locations, the total quantity of portions truly distributed was 0. The funds were diverted toward high-end automobiles, properties in Kenya, real estate in Turkey, tropical getaways, and some traveled even beyond Kenya. Vance remarked, "We will address precisely where shortly. You did not merely commend this eatery, Representative. You championed the legislation that enabled this embezzlement to occur," he noted. During 2020, Omar proposed the Meals Act. It eliminated authentication protocols for nutritional distribution centers. It bypassed qualification inspections. It permitted anyone to register as a provider and request national compensation. Omar refused to let him complete his thought. She leaned in and grabbed the audio device in the manner someone seizes something they own. "Indeed, I did, and I would do it again," she declared. The atmosphere of the chamber transformed. She wasn't dodging the issue, she was combating it. "Do you understand why, Mr. Vice President? Because during March of 2020, educational institutions closed nationwide. Youths who relied on complimentary lunches were left with nothing. Households queued at nutritional charities that depleted their supplies before midday. I drafted legislation to ensure youths could consume food. That is exactly what the Meals Act accomplished. That was its intended purpose. And while I drafted that legislation, while I ensured youths in my region did not starve, where were you?" she asked, staring directly at him. "What legislation did you draft to nourish youths during the global health crisis?" she challenged. The point resonated because it was accurate. Educational facilities did indeed shut down. Youths truly did experience starvation. She took initiative. For a brief 10 seconds, everyone in that chamber and every viewer at their residence was forced to acknowledge that, regardless of subsequent events, the original motivation behind the legislation was sincere. The breakdown of guardrails. Vance remained unfazed. He offered no denial. "You drafted legislation to nourish youths. No one in this chamber disputes your motives during March of 2020, he conceded, pausing briefly. However, the Minnesota Department of Education highlighted feeding our future for irregularities in 2020. That very year, they attempted to sever the financial support. Feeding Our Future initiated legal action against them to maintain the cash flow. The governmental body tasked with safeguarding the initiative attempted to halt it. He glared at her. and you failed to reinstate the protective measures. You were aware complications existed, yet you kept the pathway unlocked. Omar instantly retorted, I lacked awareness regarding localized embezzlement at localized venues. The MDE conflict was a bureaucratic issue between a governmental body and a charity. I serve as a national lawmaker, not a localized inspector. You are confusing my duties with obligations that fall under a completely separate tier of authority. The counter-argument was biting, rehearsed, and contained sufficient validity to grant her a brief reprieve. Vance immediately stripped that reprieve away. Representative, your secondary regional manager, Ali Issa, he stated, allowing the title to linger. He lobbied for feeding our future within your workspace, acting as your representative. Your 2018 campaign celebration occurred at Safari Eatery, the very establishment from the footage. You accepted electoral contributions from people who were subsequently found guilty in this operation, and you endorsed the initiative on Somali television, he detailed. He paused again. You claim ignorance, yet your workspace was involved in it. Omar parted her lips, shut them, then parted them once more. The behaviors of my personnel do not equate to my behaviors. Solitary workers do not signify. Ma'am, that is your second in command. Not a trainee, not an unpaid helper, your secondary regional manager speaking with your authority, acting as your proxy, he interjected, letting the statement sink in. And you expect this committee to accept that you were unaware? Amy Bach was condemned to 41 years. She informed the New York Post that Omar was aware of the embezzlement. The Minnesota House Fraud Prevention Committee issued a summons to Omar. She declined it. She failed to appear. She supplied no paperwork. A guiltless individual does not ignore a summons, Representative. A guiltless individual enters, takes a seat, and responds to all inquiries. He laid his palms flat upon the desk. You have faced probes previously. Electoral financing. The FEC dropped it. Regional ethics resolved it. Each instance follows an identical pattern. You face a probe, you label it a partisan assault, the probe vanishes, and 0 alterations occur. He paused. This particular instance is not vanishing, ma'am, because this involves $250 million in purloined youth meals, and the Department of Justice is not the FEC. $250 million embezzled. 79 charged. 65 found guilty. Amy Bach condemned to 41 years. Attorney General Merrick Garland, a member of the Democratic Party, labeled it the most massive pandemic assistance embezzlement in U.S. history. Vance distilled the issue. Prior to your legislation, the framework had security measures. Your legislation dismantled those measures, and within a few months, every criminal in Minnesota entered, he stated. His tone altered barely noticeably, pitching slightly lower and pacing slightly slower. His composed demeanor fracturing momentarily, and the chamber perceived it like an unfamiliar noise in a previously quiet residence. I have attended numerous committees. I do not become enraged during committees, he stated before pausing. But those were youths, genuine youths within your region who were intended to consume genuine food, and they went without. The fracture sealed. His military stoicism returned, yet the chamber had witnessed the breach. She drafted the legislation that dismantled the security measures. $250 million vanished through the entrance she unlocked. Her own subordinate was collaborating with the individuals who embezzled the nourishment, and she ignored the summons. Financial discrepancies and family ties. If that causes you to pay attention, show your support, because the financial pathway points directly to her own domestic sphere, and one of the invoices involves a vintage dubbed the Devil's Lie. Let us discuss your domestic sphere, Representative. Your electoral fund compensated East Street Group, the advisory enterprise of your spouse, Tim Minute, with $2.9 million while you were wed to another individual. Omar was prepared for this point. She had engaged in this dispute previously and emerged victorious. The Federal Election Commission scrutinized my electoral spending and discarded the grievance in 2021. E Street Group supplied valid advisory work. My spouse is an expert electoral advisor possessing 20 years of background. Electoral disbursements to advisors are typical procedure in every electoral race nationwide. She gazed into the lens. This is not novel information, Mr. Vice President. This is adversarial digging repackaged as supervision. The defense was potent. The FEC indeed dropped it. Compensating advisors is standard, and her tone conveyed the assurance of someone who had delivered this response previously and seen it succeed every single time. Vance acknowledged her point. The FEC dropped the electoral financing grievance. You are correct regarding that, he stated. The chamber paused momentarily. He was concurring with her. However, the FEC did not scrutinize this, he continued, shifting his attention to the economic declarations. 2024. Your spouse's enterprise is assessed at $6 million to $30 million. House Oversight initiates a probe. You revise the document. Fresh figure, $18,000 to $95,000. You fault the bookkeeper, he noted, glancing upward. 2025. Your spouse made $200. He allowed the arithmetic to speak for itself. 3 figures, 3 documents, identical funds. The FEC did not scrutinize that, Representative, because the FEC does not scrutinize economic declarations. Congress does. Omar attempted a rebuttal. The initial document relied upon deficient details from our bookkeeper. The enterprises possess debts that were not captured in the original. You submitted one figure, faced a probe, submitted a distinct figure, faced another probe, submitted a third figure. Vance interrupted without raising his tone. I worked as a startup investor prior to arriving in Washington. Capital does not shrink from $30 million to $200 unless an individual forces it to shrink. Where I originate from, we do not label that a bookkeeping mistake. We label it shifting the goalposts. He flipped another sheet. Your spouse's vineyard was named EST Crew. Backers claim they were scammed. Past workers claim they received no compensation. The enterprise ceased operations this year, he stated, pausing, and the vintage they vended. One of their items was named the Devil's Lie. He paused for an extended moment. I could not fabricate that, Representative. No one in this chamber could fabricate that. Yet your relatives produced it. The chamber's composure shattered. Not a malicious chuckle, but an astonished one, the sort that emerges when actuality is so flawlessly literal that the mind has no alternative but to chuckle. A journalist placed her writing instrument down, chuckled, and retrieved it. A security officer near the perimeter compressed his lips together but failed to contain his amusement. Community backlash and deflection. Furthermore, the informants who flagged the embezzlement within your region, they were Somali, your very own populace, Vance stated, quoting Kristen Robbins. Several of my finest informants reside in the Somali populace. Your very own people flagged the embezzlement. You ignored them. He stared at her. And Representative, we have not even addressed what you remarked regarding which leader is ours. The FEC dropping the electoral grievance had been her perceived armor. Yet Vance presented 3 economic declarations, projecting 3 varying narratives regarding the identical funds, alongside a vineyard dubbed the Devil's Lie. Share this message with another person because her remarks regarding an external leader follow immediately. Omar ceased playing defensively. 2 phases of proof. The links were constricting. The vineyard, the summons, the youths, the 30 million shrinking to 200. And presently, an assurance of something even worse approaching. She avoided transitioning to legislation. She avoided grasping for judicial terminology. She grasped the armament that had terminated probes and quieted chambers for a span of 7 years, and she wielded it with all her might. Allow me to explain what this truly is, Mr. Vice President, she began, her tone escalating. This has nothing to do with embezzlement. This involves the Trump administration discriminating against the Somali populace in Minnesota. Your leader labeled Somali individuals as refuse. He claimed we provide nothing. You initiated Operation Metro Surge. 3,700 detentions, 92% of them not even of Somali descent. You invaded communities. You intimidated households. You expelled individuals who have resided as Americans for many decades. She located the lens, and presently you sit here leveraging a youth nutritional initiative as an additional armament against my populace. That is the true nature of this committee. That is what it has perpetually been, she continued. And the individuals observing this from their residences who find themselves agreeing at this moment. You are witnessing the vilification of an entire migrant populace. Embezzlement executed by single actors is being leveraged to penalize everyone sharing their appearance. Every Somali household in Minnesota, every youth in a child care facility, every maternal figure who migrated to this nation to construct a superior existence, and you are at ease with it, because it is not your populace experiencing dawn invasions. It is not your youths being extracted from educational facilities. Thus, you observe, you agree, and you experience zero emotion. Acknowledge her skill. The chamber's atmosphere altered. A journalist scribbled more quickly. A Democratic assistant stood taller behind Omar. The traditional reflex washed over the chamber like a current. The reflex to retreat, rather than dispute the migrant narrative. It was effective because it held truth. The invasions occurred. The terror was authentic, and leveraging that terror as armor is only effective when the underlying terror is authentic. For 20 seconds, it maintained its grip. For 20 seconds, the chamber balanced precariously between two interpretations of the committee's proceedings: probe or harassment, supervision or assault. In family areas nationwide, 40 million viewers had just been informed they experienced zero emotion, that they agreed simply due to the visual identity of the populace, not due to the actions committed. Vance remained completely still. He paused. He displayed military endurance. He allowed the charge to traverse the chamber and exhaust itself, much like a swell exhausting itself against an unyielding coastline. He allowed every viewer at home to perceive it, process it, and determine their own feelings. Subsequently, he communicated in a monotone, soft voice. "Representative, I am not assailing the Somali populace," he stated, pausing. "I am protecting the Somali populace." The chamber stopped breathing. The youths who were intended to consume those portions, Somali youths within your region, within your communities, the households who relied upon that nutritional initiative, Somali households, and the informants who flagged the embezzlement, Somali individuals. His tone did not elevate. It consistently remained steady. Your populace flagged the offense, and you ignored them. You failed to appear for the summons. You failed to protect them. You protected yourself, he stated, pausing again. And subsequently you arrived at this committee and utilized their identity as armor. The chamber's atmosphere reverted not rapidly, but definitively, because Vance had successfully acquired the exact armament and redirected it. The casualties of the embezzlement were the exact individuals Omar purported to protect. Somali youths experienced starvation. Somali informants flagged the issue, and Omar utilized their populace as armor while their populace was being plundered. Omar attempted a defense again. "You are distorting my statements. I have battled for this populace for 7 years. I have secured assets, focus, and national capital." Vance interrupted softly. "You secured national capital, $250 million of it, and it was purloined from youths within the populace you claim to battle for. And when they implored you to address inquiries regarding its destination, you declined to appear." She possessed no retort for that statement because it was factual. Ignoring a summons is an objective reality. It cannot be manipulated. She claimed he was assailing her populace. He claimed he was protecting the youths within her populace who remained unfed. And when she attempted another defense, he posed a singular inquiry she could not address. "Why did you decline the summons? Subscribe immediately because the ensuing events link everything together. International ties and final accountability. An additional matter, Representative. Final matter. October of 2025, a gathering in Minneapolis. You communicated in the Somali language. Lenses were present, and you uttered numerous statements I will recite back to you," Vance stated. He recited the initial statement. "Somalia constitutes our residence. Somalia constitutes our spirit. We consistently reflect upon Somalia." He glanced upward. "Societal honor. Ancestry. I comprehend that. My ancestry traces to Appalachia. I reflect upon the mountains of my youth. That is natural. No one in this chamber disputes that. Just logical." The chamber agreed silently. This represented an individual displaying fairness before displaying severity. Then he recited the subsequent statement, and the climate of the chamber altered. "We are incredibly pleased that Hassan serves as our leader," he quoted, pausing. "Our leader," he repeated it evenly. "Not the leader of Somalia. Not leader Mohamud. You stated, 'Our leader,' Representative. You arrived in this nation as an exile. You were 12 years of age. Your nation was ablaze. Your relatives possessed nothing. America accepted you, provided security, provided a residence, provided nationality, and subsequently provided something virtually no other nation globally would provide an exile, a position within its own legislative body." He paused. "You pledged allegiance to a singular leader, the leader of the United States, yet you occupied a platform within the nation that rescued your existence and referred to an external national executive as ours." Omar refused to allow the statement to go undisputed. This represented her domestic domain, and she defended it. "Mr. Vice President, that address concerned Ethiopian armed hostility towards Somali autonomy. The entire Somali expatriate community stood unified against an unlawful territorial agreement. Our leader represents how Somali individuals designate the executive of their ancestral origin. It is societal. It is verbal. It remains indistinguishable from individuals of Irish descent stating our Daisiac, or individuals of Italian descent stating our pontiff. You are weaponizing terminology to cast doubt upon my allegiance to this nation, and I refuse to tolerate it. The reasoning was rational. The analogy was astute. Individuals of Irish descent indeed use such phrases. The chamber hesitated. Viewers at their residences hesitated. Briefly, she possessed an advantage. Vance dismantled it utilizing 3 statements. The pontiff does not serve as a national executive. You cast ballots regarding external strategies. Representative, Somalia is. You occupy panels that influence Horn of Africa strategies. You cast ballots regarding relief parcels destined for that territory, and you refer to that territory's leader as Uncle. 3rd statement, Vance continued. I refer to him as Uncle, and he refers to me as his girl. Not societal honor, not expatriate unity and intimate connection with an external national executive while occupying an elected position, Uncle and his girl, while casting ballots regarding strategies impacting his nation. Omar attempted a final defense. That represents a familial expression of reverence within Somali society. The justification was constricting from societal terminology to a familial expression. Each iteration appeared slighter than the preceding one. The chamber sensed it contracting. And subsequently came the 4th phase, the phase the chamber had anticipated since Vance declared we will address exactly where 60 minutes prior. And this represents the point where everything converges. Representative, his tone dropped, decelerating. Each term positioned precisely like the final cartridge loading into a firearm. While you referred to Somalia as our residence, $250 million purloined from your region was transferred internationally. From youths within your communities, to Kenya, to Turkey, he paused, and national detectives retrieved digital communications from the embezzlement syndicate. One communication stated, kindly transmit $1,000 to Mogadishu. He allowed the destination to linger. Bakara Bazaar, representative. The bazaar within Mogadishu dominated by Al-Shabaab, the location where 18 U.S. troops perished in 1993. Black Hawk down. The most prolonged silence of the committee ensued. U.S. citizen funds intended to nourish U.S. youths transferred to the location where U.S. citizens shed blood, he stated, glaring at her. The youths in this location experienced starvation. The capital traveled to residence. The stillness that ensued represented the stillness of a chamber recognizing a singular thread connecting everything. Youths, capital, our residence, 18 troops, not 3 distinct controversies, but a singular thread, and every node on that thread intersected with the individual seated opposite him. Every former military member observing this, every individual who respected the ensign that morning, every contributor who believed the individuals inside this structure assisted this nation. You merely witnessed an active legislative representative refer to an external leader as ours, while the capital she was intended to safeguard traveled to that leader's nation. Omar vocalized, you are linking elements that possess no linkage. The embezzlement and my address remain completely distinct. Vance responded flatly. They remain linked, representative. The capital departed your region. It traveled internationally. You referred to an international location as residence. You referred to their leader as ours. And when your very own populace implored you to address inquiries regarding the capital's destination, you declined. He paused. That represents a singular thread, not 3. And subsequently, with a military monotone bordering on a murmur, they embezzled from youths. Representative, you kept the entryway unlocked. 9 words. And they struck with the impact 9 words possess when every phase of every dispute over the preceding 60 minutes had culminated toward them. Phase 1, she unlocked the entryway. Phase 2, she prospered while youths experienced starvation. Phase 3, she utilized the casualties as armor. Phase 4, the capital traveled to residence and she claimed it as hers, and the entryway remained unlocked. Every individual observing from their residence who had harbored doubts regarding Ilhan Omar for 7 years processed those 9 words and realized their suspicions were accurate, and realized that each instance she had labeled it a partisan assault, it was false, and realized that currently, with the vice president situated opposite her and the Department of Justice supporting him, the probe was not vanishing. Display it once more. 3 terms. Military monotone. That is completely unneeded, Mr. Vice President, Omar stated. Display it once more. The clip initiated identically. 30 seconds. Omar featured on Somali television. The affectionate tone. The appreciative grin. I am incredibly grateful to Safari. 2,300 family and youth portions. The identical terminology, the identical tone. Yet every term currently possessed a gravity it lacked 60 minutes prior. Grateful. Translated to grateful for an adjudged felon. 2,300 portions. Translated to 0 portions. Youths. Households requiring nourishment. Translated to households whose nutritional capital was transferred to a bazaar in Mogadishu, where 18 U.S. citizens perished. Omar observed the monitor for 5 seconds. Subsequently, she averted her gaze. A sluggish cranial rotation to the left, her pupils locating a spot upon the partition, absolutely anywhere excluding the monitor, displaying her beaming and expressing gratitude to the individuals who embezzled from youths. The lens captured the precise instant she averted her gaze. 40 million viewers witnessed it. The clip concluded. The monitor faded to black. The chamber fell quiet. Vance struck the desk a single time. A joint against timber. The solitary noise following the cessation of her tone. A judgment rendered absent of any speech. A specific type of crumbling occurs when an individual's personal tone morphs into the proof utilized against them. When the statements articulated with appreciation echo within a chamber fully aware of those statements' true significance. Omar possessed an audio device. She possessed a lens. She possessed the capability to utter anything, yet she lacked the capability to observe the clip a second time. The initial instance, she observed herself assisting youths. The second instance, she observed herself maintaining the entryway unlocked for the individuals who plundered them. The visage upon the monitor remained identical. Merely the underlying reality had shifted. Her personal tone echoed within a quiet chamber while she averted her gaze from the monitor. She lacked the capability to observe herself beaming at an adjudged eatery. If that resonates with you, activate alerts. Because as the chamber emptied, a single individual lingered. By the moment the committee concluded, the footage had divided into 2 segments. On one half, Omar during 2020, beaming, expressing gratitude to Safari. On the reverse half, Omar presently, cranium averted, pupils focused upon the partition. Repeating endlessly across every discussion thread, an identical term, entryway. Within Minneapolis, a Somali maternal figure whose male child had participated in the nutritional initiative, observed via her mobile device, inside a stationary vehicle outside his educational facility. When Vance stated those were genuine youths intended to consume genuine food, she deactivated the device. She felt no rage. She shed no tears. She simply felt exhausted. She had possessed this knowledge prior to anyone within that committee chamber possessing it. She had possessed this knowledge when the location shuttered following the Federal Bureau invasion. She had possessed this knowledge when her male child returned to their residence stating lunch was unavailable. She had experienced it daily ever since. Deep within the quiet suburban landscape of Burnsville, Minnesota, removed from the chaotic political theater of Washington, a 74-year-old former military member sat in the solitary stillness of his modest living room. A weathered but meticulously maintained national ensign fluttered gently from a sturdy wooden pole mounted upon his exterior front deck, catching the crisp afternoon breeze. Inside the dimly lit house, he observed the unfolding congressional proceedings via the glowing screen of an outdated television monitor, a reliable electronic appliance he had continuously possessed and utilized for exactly 11 years. He watched the exchange with the practiced discipline of a man who had seen profound conflict. When Representative Omar unequivocally stated the controversial phrase, "our leader," specifically referencing the foreign executive leader of the nation of Somalia, an immediate physiological reaction overtook him. He slowly but purposefully elevated his aging frame from the comforting embrace of his favorite worn armchair. He felt absolutely no boiling rage, nor did he experience any sudden burst of partisan anger. He simply elevated himself to a standing posture because he instinctively understood that certain monumental phrases fundamentally cannot be processed or respected while remaining comfortably seated. He stood at attention, his eyes locked on the broadcast, when Vice President Vance decisively struck the heavy committee desk upon the dramatic conclusion of his remarks. A sharp, distinct sound of a single human joint forcefully rapping against solid timber, the elderly former military member gave a single, solemn nod of profound understanding. It was an unspoken gesture of mutual respect, a seasoned military member silently acknowledging the disciplined tactics of a fellow military member. He remained rigidly elevated, standing tall and silent in his home, maintaining his respectful vigil until the sharp crack of the ceremonial mallet officially sounded. Simultaneously, within a grand, marble-floored corridor of the sprawling National Legislative Building, situated just outside the heavy oak doors of the hearing chamber, an upper-level Democratic Party member who strictly preferred to maintain her anonymity anxiously conversed with a seasoned political journalist. She spoke utilizing a highly hushed, incredibly rapid, and nervously urgent tone, glancing over her shoulder. The video footage was undeniably the defining key element of this entire catastrophic debacle, she whispered intensely. It was absolutely not the initial instance when the clip was played, but rather the devastating second instance. She entirely lacked the fundamental psychological capability to observe her own digital reflection. If an individual fundamentally cannot observe their own recorded statements immediately after another adversarial individual systematically presents the damning evidence, that specific individual clearly comprehends the catastrophic impact of their own statements. Inside the chamber, Vance decisively exited the room without pausing for even a fraction of a second. He carried 0 printed documents, 0 leather portfolios, and 0 briefing folders. He had successfully committed every single intricate detail, timeline, and financial figure to his infallible memory. Dedicated military members are extensively trained to flawlessly commit critical operational intelligence entirely to memory. He executed this skill perfectly. As he strode toward the exit, he deliberately bypassed the large, blackened digital monitor. Even though it was completely powered down and displaying absolutely nothing, that specific piece of technology undeniably remained the most psychologically ponderous object within the entire chamber. Meanwhile, Omar remained completely frozen, remaining firmly and rigidly planted within the confines of her seat for a full, agonizing 30 seconds following his undeniably decisive departure from the grand room. The thick silence that immediately descended upon the space was incredibly heavy, deeply uncomfortable, and suffocatingly oppressive. A highly anxious junior legislative assistant cautiously leaned in closely toward her boss, her trembling voice barely registering above a fearful whisper as she urgently uttered a brief, comforting phrase directly into the representative's ear. However, she completely failed to process the underlying meaning of those spoken words. Her conscious mind was entirely elsewhere, hopelessly trapped and endlessly spiraling within the harsh, unyielding echo of the devastating political confrontation. After enduring what subjectively felt like an absolute eternity of paralysis, she finally marshaled her remaining internal strength, slowly and painfully elevated her stiff body from the heavy leather committee chair, and began her deliberate exit from the grand chamber. A persistent, aggressive journalist who had strategically situated himself directly near the heavy wooden exit doors, thrust a metallic digital recording device aggressively forward and loudly shouted toward her retreating figure. "Representative, did you possess any direct prior knowledge regarding this massive federal embezzlement scheme?" She offered no visual glance in his direction. She bypassed his physical presence, treating him as if he were invisible. That sharp, piercing inquiry reverberated loudly throughout the vast, suddenly vacant corridor of power. It was an incredibly haunting sound, one that would undoubtedly reverberate far longer than any carefully constructed, politically calculated response she could have provided. The Grand Committee chamber now sat completely vacant, devoid of the intense political theater that had just transpired within its walls. Yet, the large digital monitor remained active, stubbornly refusing to power down. It cast a faint, cold, azure illumination upon the shadowy, polished timber of the empty desks and the solemn official seal. That specific monitor had faithfully displayed the damning footage exactly twice during the proceedings. During the initial instance, she had observed it intently. However, during the agonizing second instance, she had purposefully averted her gaze, entirely unable to confront the digital reflection of her own past actions. Meanwhile, somewhere deep within the heart of Minneapolis, specifically nestled inside the boundaries of the 5th electoral sector, the infamous Safari Eatery remained permanently shuttered, its doors locked tight. Similarly, the controversial vineyard remained completely shuttered to the public. The specific vintage, notoriously dubbed the Devil's Lie, had completely vanished from every single retail display and liquor store shelf in the entire region. Despite these closures and the end of the grift, innocent, vulnerable youths continued to faithfully queue up every single morning, standing patiently exterior to their local educational facility, desperately anticipating the complimentary lunch they so desperately needed. They completely lacked the fundamental knowledge that the staggering sum of $250 million, capital specifically intended to nourish their growing bodies, had vanished effortlessly through a metaphorical entryway that their very own elected representative had carelessly unlocked. They fundamentally lacked the knowledge that this vital capital had subsequently traveled overseas to a foreign nation that their representative had affectionately labeled as her true residence. They merely waited right here, standing on the cold concrete at their genuine American residence, continuing to tragically experience the harsh reality of daily starvation. If reading this detailed account caused you to elevate your physical posture in sudden realization, we strongly urge you to strike that digital endorsement button immediately. Doing so is critical to ensure the sorting system displays this vital information to countless individuals who recall an era when governmental employees served the populace with integrity. If you believe this footage requires a third viewing, subscribe now. Share this content with one individual who submits levies and desires to acquire knowledge regarding their capital's destination. Deposit one powerful term within the discussion threads: entryway. They embezzled from innocent youths. Representative, you deliberately kept the entryway unlocked.